Well, hello, Internet. So nice to see you, and welcome to another music theory talk. Today, we're going to talk about rhythm guitar. We're going to talk about how to accompany other people or a solo or simply playing rhythm guitar. Because let's face it, as guitar players, most of what we like to think we do is to play lead, and most of what we actually do, it's play rhythm. And your rhythm skills your rhythm guitar skills are what makes or break you as a guitar player. That's what it is in the real world, okay? If you actually have a band or play around your higher gun, okay, that's what it is, okay? So, before we go ahead, if you're watching us, say hi in the chat or comments and let us know from where you are. I already see Jeff, and we're from Froth, Wyoming, and Warren from Antioch, and okay, so if you were there, say hi in the chat. We like to know where you're watching us from. Very good. So, today with me to talk about rhythm guitar, I have one of the experts. So, without further ado, let me introduce you to Mark Turko. Mark, wait, there we go. How's it going, Mark?
It's going fantastic. How are you, Tommaso?
Very good for me. So, Mark from rhythmguitarlessons.net. Like the website says, Mark knows something about rhythm guitar. So, Mark.
A little bit.
Right. Yeah, a little bit. Sure. Mark.
Yes.
Let's start on. Let's start on one of the key questions here. Okay, so when you're given a chord chart, or when you're given a song to play with, how do you start thinking? How do you approach the whole thing?
If I'm given a chart, well, first thing for me is I look at the chart and I don't immediately start playing. I try to see exactly what is being presented to me. Sometimes a chart is very specific and they tell me the types of chords they want me to play exactly. And then other times it's more or less a skeleton. And when I'm giving something that's a skeleton, my assumption usually is that it's open for interpretation. Now, I get it that I have to play major chords when I need to play my major chords and minor chords, most likely. They don't want me to deviate too far. But if it just says A minor seventh, I'm sorry, A minor, I most likely am allowed to play an A minor seventh chord and it'll sound just fine. Without hearing who's going to be accompanying me and what they're doing, maybe that A minor seventh chord wouldn't sound great and I'll have to stick to just a regular A minor chord. But if it tells me I need to play an A minor seventh, then I need to play an A minor seventh chord. So, anyways, that's the first thing that I look for. I look for, does it look like a skeleton or is it very specific in what they want me to do?
Okay, so let's clarify a bit for a few of our watchers here, for our audience, because I mean what you say, it's clear to me and it's clear to other professionals because we've been there, but some people don't know that. So what actual elements in the score, in the chord chart, will tell you if it's a skeleton or not? Can you make an example on a situation where it's not a skeleton?
Anytime that they're giving me A minor seven, add nine, and all of those incidentals that come afterwards, that means they're being very specific.
Yeah.
If I just see G, well, then there's probably some leeway. But if I'm being told that I need to add additional notes to the chord, that means that they're being very specific.
So basically, the more complex are the chord symbols, the more specific they are being.
Yes.
And so the less leeway you have to add, subtract, or do those things.
Correct. Absolutely. Yes. So the more complicated, the more scarier the chord looks, the less leeway I have.
Yeah, the scarier it is, the less choice you have.
Yes, exactly. Which brings me to, I'm glad we're talking about this because I see that a lot with my students where not necessarily they're just handed a chord chart, but they see something that looks very intimidating. I mean, it's just like this outcry. Oh my God, what is that? You know what I mean?
Yep.
And I'm like, actually, it's in many cases it can be quite easy in what they're learning if they're beginning to. I tell them most of the time. Most of the time, you just got to take a finger away. I go, it's actually easier to finger. The name gets more complex, but the fingering actually gets easier. That's not always the case, but yes. So the more complex it looks, the scarier it looks because they're just so used to majors, minors, and that's about it. Basic majors and minors, and that's about it. So, which brings us to our topic today. You know, what can and can't we add or delete from particular chords? So, I guess if we're starting from the ground up, for those who don't know, when you're building a chord, let's just say we're building a basic major or a minor chord. If we were just to take a scale, say we're going to be talking about the A minor scale. The
Mhm.
notes of an A minor scale are A, B, C, D, E, F, G. And if you just choose the first note, the third note, and the fifth note of that scale, and you play those notes, A, C, and E, all together at the same time, that's an A minor chord. That's where your chords come from. They are extracted out of a particular scale. That's it. There's no other mystery behind it. There's no voodoo. There's no crazy formulas that had to be concocted. You just take the notes of a scale and you pick the first one, the third one, and the fifth note, and we just play them at the same time. And we have major chords and we have minor chords. So we could use that with any major or minor scale as well. That's really as basic as it gets. And when I tell my students that's all that we do when we're playing chords, there is silence the majority of the time.
It's too
And
simple.
the head kind of turns like, huh, really? Yeah, yeah, really. It's not that big of a deal. And then the next question is, well, what about a seventh chord? I'm glad you ask, I say. I said, then we pick the first, the third, the fifth, and the seventh note of the scale. And now we play all those four notes simultaneously, and you have a seventh. And then there's silence. And then they realize it's not that big of a mystery. There's not a lot of voodoo that goes into this. There's not a lot of mystery that goes into this. And, you know, that's really where I start my students off as far as getting into uh, making the scary looking chords be more manageable to understand. And then once they understand that, then it actually becomes easier after that. It's not
Mhm.
it's not so crazy. What type of approach do you use for your students, Tommaso?
I'm using a similar approach, actually. Using a similar approach. I mean, it's when with this kind of basic skills like reading a chord chart, we cannot deviate much from that. That's what we do.
Mm.
So, but yeah, I use a similar approach. I actually advise them to play as few notes as possible.
Mm.
And by the way, this is a saying. You have to play less notes. This is a saying that it's very much misunderstood because people seem to apply this the wrong way. I don't mean few notes in time. Okay, I don't mean slow. I don't mean don't shred. If you want to shred, shred. Okay, I'm not saying few notes in that sense. I'm saying restrict the set of the notes you play. So if your chord is A minor, you could play all those notes, but you could also play these. Okay, and or these or these. I mean, it really depends on a bass. You just play those two notes. Okay, meaning I'm picking two notes from the chord rather than playing three, and I let the bass player figure out to play the bass and ground everything. That's kind of my approach is this, because when we play in a band situation, you've been in a band, I've been in a band, several, or both of us. Um, Other people here listening to us have been in a band. We all have the experience that that's too much. Okay, there is you, maybe another guitar player, and a piano player or keyboard player, and the singer, and everybody's trying to raise their volume because they cannot hear themselves, and they're all playing all the notes they can, and all of them on beat one of every bar. Ugh. Okay, so of course you can't hear yourself. I mean, you are all competing for the space. So the intelligent approach, so that the audience can hear you and the song sounds better, is don't play when and where everybody else is playing. If they're playing lots of notes, play one or two. Your notes cut through better because it's just one or two frequencies.
Yes.
Okay, if they all play on beat one, don't play on beat one. So if it's 1, 2, 3, 4, I mean, unless the song requires you, and so you're playing a specific riff and you have to hit that beat one, but if you don't play on beat one. Let everybody else on beat one, and you play on beat 2, 3, and 4. Okay, they can hear you better. So if the song goes like 1, 2, wait, Devia. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm not doing 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3. I'm doing 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3. So I'm completely jumping. Okay, that's one.
Yeah. Well, there's more room for you to be heard,
Yeah,
and you're not sharing the same amount of time, meaning that space of time with the other instruments. And many times in that space of time, there's going to be other things going on that may end up masking the note that you play anyways. So don't even bother playing it.
exactly.
Don't play during that time.
Do you do something similar?
What's that, Tommaso?
Do you do something similar in your playing, and when you teach your students?
Yeah, it depends. It's a situational thing where if you're the one required to make the most important note happen, then of course you don't skip it. But if you're not the most important, and I unfortunately I tell my students all the time, we actually are one of the very least important things in an ensemble. Guitar players are. Guitar players don't want to admit that, but we are very, very, very expendable. Yeah, you can't have a guitar. You can't not have a guitar and guitar-based music, but you're the least important. The rhythm section comes first, and you're accompanying the rhythm section is really what you're doing. And you're trying to stay out of the way of the most important thing, which in contemporary or a pop band is typically the vocals. So you're not important as you're not as important as the rhythm section, and you have to stay out of the way of the vocalist. So I mean,
Absolutely.
just when you put it that way, how important do you really think that the guitar really is? It's really not. So really, where the art comes in is where can I play that I'm going to be heard the best? So obviously, if it's a break in the drums and the rhythm and there's no vocals, you don't want to drop the beat, you know, when you're supposed to. But there's moments that you need to pick. And it could be the entirety of the whole song is that one moment that comes after the beat, but you need to pick your battles. You need to choose the place in which you're actually going to be heard. And you could choose what types of chords you want to play.
Mhm.
And just like you said, you don't necessarily need to play all three notes. You can actually skip the root note if the bass player is playing the root note, and you could just play the other two notes of the chord if we're talking about a major or minor chord. And it's going to sound just like it's supposed to. That's the amazing thing about it is it sounds just like it's supposed to.
Yeah.
So I have a question for you, which I think you might be better at explaining this because I just said, don't play the chord. Play two notes of the chord and let somebody else carry the chord. Can you briefly explain how the modern way of looking at what a chord is actually never really existed traditionally back in music? And that's playing a chord is more of a modern concept than it is a traditional thing. Because I know I've heard it from you before, and I could explain it, but I know you can explain it better because I learned it from you.
Well, the thing is that chords were invented at a certain point. Okay, and before that, we didn't think of chords. We were still playing notes on top of each other. We will still today call those things chord, but the musicians at the time were not. They were not thinking, let's play a C major, let's play an A minor, etc. They were just thinking in terms of, hey, we have multiple melodies going on, and those melodies cross each other essentially. And then when they overlap, we create those kind of consonances between um, those melodies. Okay, so the idea that the chords were mostly accidental respect to the melodies. Okay, and then they figured out what was working better and what was not working as good, and how to make the wrong stuff work anyway, etc. At a certain point, though, somebody decided, somebody we know who, okay, Jean-Philippe Rameau, okay, in 1722, published this book saying, no, we could think about these as if they are those vertical thing, and we're going to call them chords, okay? I mean, I'm simplifying the story, but that's the idea. And then everybody else was studying on that rather than studying the original idea. And so people were like, okay, we have this chord, so we have to play all those notes, okay? I still hear stuff like, if you play only two notes, it's not a complete chord. You need to play at least three notes to play a complete chord. And I'm like, what if I don't want to play a complete chord? Okay. You can totally make music with an incomplete chord. In fact, that's what I mean. How was the song? Okay, those are tenths, meaning it's a third plus an octave. This is G and B. It comes from a G major chord, but this gives a different feeling than this. Okay, and then when you go, this gives a different feeling than. Okay, makes sense. So, and this is an incomplete chord. In the score, you're gonna find this notated as G, but it's just the G and the B. That is not the D note.
Yeah.
Okay, I mean the D note could fit, but it's superfluous. Okay, so in a sense, I mean, I don't want to use this language because then people go like, this is clickbait, etc. But you've been lied to. Okay, that's what it is. This idea of the complete chord, it's a fiction. You can use it. It's one legit way of composing music, but it's not the only way, and you don't have to play a complete chord. That's it. So even when you see the symbol, you can play less notes. Because either other people are going to play them, or nobody's going to play them, but it can still work.
It does because those two, let's just say two out of the three notes is implying what we want to hear, the full chord, but it has a different sound.
Yes.
So it's not that we're doing it just for the sake of leaving out a note. We actually like the way it sounds. It's a
Yes.
choice. And to say it's not a chord is not accurate. It's not
Yeah.
one note. It's more
Yeah,
than
you see,
one note.
that's the thing. It's why we started saying that two notes chords are not chords.
I call them chords. I do, but I kind of put a little disclaimer in. You know what I mean? Because I understand everybody thinks chords are, you know, I mean, well, first we have to get people from chords are 5 and 6 strings big down to just 3 notes on 3 strings. That's a
It's a right
big
ball. Yeah.
that's a big leap because all we need is one occurrence of that root, the third and the fifth, like I said. But that's not totally true when I'm giving them that information because we could just play 2 out of the 3 notes. But
Yeah.
that's too much information all at once.
or or too little information in this game.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
So, yes. So that's why, how could that be a chord? I call them 2 note chords. Sometimes I don't even know if this is a real term. Sometimes I call them dyads.
Yeah, but you see that's the thing. It's
I don't know even know if that's official.
everything we said. Well, who knows? Everything. I mean, what's official? I mean, at this point, I
That's
mean,
true.
it's. But what we're saying right now seems controversial and stuff, etc. But we built entire musical styles on chords of two notes. I mean, the power chord,
Yes.
the root and the
Yes.
fifth chord, and with no thirds.
Yes.
Blues, rock, metal are based on that. Okay.
Yes. And for the longest time, I couldn't figure out, well, I understand there's only 2 notes, and there one note is missing that makes it major or minor. How can this chord progression possibly be in a major or a minor key? I don't
Yeah.
understand this. It took me a long time to realize,
Mm-hmm.
oh, because the root notes are following the major or the minor scale.
Yep.
But I'm telling you, for me, that was incomprehensible because I had that. You need the major or the minor third in order to dictate whether it's a major or minor chord. And some chords are major and some chords are minor in certain keys. And if we don't have major or minor chords, how can we possibly know what key this is in?
Mm-hmm.
It was
Mm-hmm.
very confusing for me.
It is confusing. It's confusing because it's explained in the wrong direction. Okay.
I know.
Yeah, it's they should have started saying, okay, that's the scale. A scale is a set of notes, and you can restrict yourself to a scale, or you may not restrict yourself to a scale. It's completely optional. But if you choose to use this scale, meaning restrict yourself to those notes, then in your music or section or whatever, you use only notes inside the scale. It's a legit way of composing music, not the only one. Then you can take 2 notes at a time and play them together, and that's a chord, or 3 notes or 4 notes, etc. Now, not all the combinations sound nice. The combination of notes that sound nice are those. Start with those, then explore all the other two, because the others are totally legit too. Okay. So, I mean, I don't. We take a key and we play the thirds. Okay. And that's totally legit. Okay, we can play the 10th. We take a key and we play the 5th. Okay, with the power chord. I don't see why we cannot play all the other ones. We can play the 6th, we can play the 7th, we can play the seconds. I mean, you can make music with those too.
Yeah,
Let's
sixes
come
sound
on.
nice.
So sixes sound great. Oops. Sixes sound great all the time.
Yes.
I mean,
All the time.
even playing sevens, people don't do that. Why don't you make your chord in 7? I mean, it's dissonant, yeah. But stay there a moment and hear. It sounds
Yeah.
lovely.
It sounds lovely. He's right. It really
Okay,
does.
so it's just a matter of, hey, we build the chord in thirds and we put three notes, that's a convention because of a number of reasons, mostly historical. And if you build music with that, it sounds good. And the notation is very nice on that. But that's one option, not all the options. Okay. Like you were saying, we have leeway. If the chord is A minor, okay, and so my notes are A, C, and E, and the chord chart is mostly triads essentially, so I know they're not specifying extra things, and I have leeway. I can play only the A and the C, only the A and the E, only the C and the E, and let the bass player play the bass. But I can also put in a G, which is the seventh, and then play two of those notes, like the C and the G, and let the bass player play the bass. Okay. Okay, I can put in a ninth, so play out the E, which is the fifth, and the B, which is the ninth. Let the bass player play the A, and play these instead. I have space. That's the thing.
Well, that
Okay.
goes back to multiple instruments playing notes, and you don't need to play all of the notes. You can allow the other instruments that you're participating in whatever ensemble to actually, the group of you will be creating a chord.
Yes, exactly. So, and again, it depends who you're playing with. If you're playing with classical musicians and you do this, they're going to freak out.
Right.
I remember once I was adding a 9 to a minor chord, and they freaked out completely. Like, that's not in the score. Does it sound good? Okay. Anyway, we were having this gig when we were recording a song for a friend of mine. There were 2 or 3 classical players, and you were in there. Anyway, if you play with jazz musician, they will freak out if you don't do it, okay, because they are expected to do it. So it depends who you're playing with, what's the situation, etc. Okay. Which, I mean, I know it's very inconvenient for our listeners here, and the people watching this live stream, because it depends on the context. It depends who you're playing with. So there is no shame in going and asking the band leader, can I do whatever I want with the chords, or it's strict? Okay. And they tell you. I mean, it would be obvious to them which one of the two it is. I mean, like, why do you even ask? But they will tell you, and so you know what to do in that band and in that situation. Okay. Yeah. But it's definitely an option that it's usually left unstated. And it's different from group to group, from band to band, from style of music to style of music. Okay. But here's the thing, okay? So you have space. So you can do what jazz player call substitution, which is what I just did. You don't play the 3 note of the chord and just those 3. You play less notes or different notes or more notes, okay, that work on that chord, okay? Like we say, if a rock player writes A minor, they mostly mean A minor, maybe A minor 7 or A minor 9. If a classical player writes A minor, it's A minor. If a jazz player writes A minor, they typically mean A minor 7, A minor 7, 9, which is A minor 9. A minor 6 with a 9, okay. Like, they typically mean these. They write A minor, okay. Or any other kind of minor, vaguely minor sounding chord, okay? So it's just that it's something different is meant. Okay, something different is meant by those symbols. So you adapt accordingly. So, and that's one thing. The second thing is this. So I'm gonna tell these stories. Years ago, they hired me to do a musical. I did several musicals since, to play in several local production of musical, but it was the first one. They hired me because I was at an open jam session. I met a drummer there, and I played pretty well. I glued with the drum section, etc., the rhythm section, and they were like, "Okay, you can follow time. We are doing this musical when we need a guitar player. Okay, so just go and audition." I could not read a note. They gave me a score, and I could not read a note. There was a chord chart on top, but the score part was completely opaque for me. Okay, so there were all those kind of lines I was supposed to play, And not only I could not read them in real time, I could not read them, period. I didn't even learn how to read music at the time. So what did I do? I listened to what other people were doing and I played the chord, what I just described. Okay, so let's try to play something that fits the rhythm. It does not too many notes. It stays out of the way of the keyboard and the piano. Okay, it's kind of complement the thing. It doesn't. It's not too busy when the singers are singing. Okay, singers hate when they have to fight for space. They want the first spot. They want the front spot. They're the singers. Okay, people are looking at them, and they don't want to fight for these. They want everything to complement them. And I mean, you may think what you want of singers. I think that's due to them. I mean, because if you can yell for an hour and a half of music, you deserve not to have to yell more. Okay, so I tried to complement that. They got me immediately.
Yeah.
They told me, they told me why. I mean, well, first of all, you can play in time with the drummer. That's a big plus. Second, you're easy to work with, and especially, we like how you change all the parts, you, especially when they were not fitting what the singers were doing. Everybody else just played the score, and it was too hard for us to be heard. So, I mean, I learned to read scenes, but I'm still changing the parts mercilessly. I don't care. I mean, if I can make the life of the singer easier, but not playing in his or her frequencies when he or she are singing, I'm doing it. Okay, I have no problem. Rather than playing, okay, the big thing, I have no problem going because it's easier for them to cover these, to play, to sing something like that than singing over. Okay, makes sense. So that's the idea. You do whatever you want with the score. You do whatever you want with the rhythm, and you look to the other people in the band to see if you're doing a good job. Okay.
Yeah,
Now,
you ticked off all the boxes. You locked in with the rhythm section. You complemented the other instruments. You stayed out of the way of the singer. That's what I was talking about before. You have to fit in to what's going on. You are not the most important. And what they say, you got the gig.
yeah, and I want also to clarify one thing. I'm not saying all this to brag. I was doing these mostly because I did not know what I was doing. Okay.
Well, whichever the initial reason,
Yeah.
ultimately, that is actually what you want to be able to do if you're going in cold or you're playing with people for the first time. You know, it's if it, especially if it's a larger ensemble, you need to carve out, you need to know where you're supposed to reside, and then you need to make the best use of that space that's there. And
Yep.
that's where what we're talking about today, simplifying things. We don't need to play a six string version of the chord. Maybe
Mhm.
just two notes out of the chord is going to be sufficient because all the other instruments is going to build it's going to build a big huge chord. Now
And
I don't
again,
know if this is true.
that depends on the context. I mean, if it's only you, if it's only the guitar and maybe two or three singers, by all means,
Oh
strum
yeah,
all those really.
you have to fill up space. Absolutely. Yes. Yes, it's situational. Yes. You're sitting around a campfire, you are the rhythm and you are the harmony, you are everything. You know? So then you're pounding away. Absolutely.
Yes.
So I don't know how true this is. Maybe I'll recall which band it was. This is a band from the late 80s or early 90s. And when they went into big budget, old fashioned recording studio situation where they went in and they multi tracked the guitars, but they built the chords one note at a time on each track. And that's why their album sounded the way that it did because it's as if you had six guitars
Mm-hmm.
playing because you did. So you had 6 separate tracks building one chord, and
Mm-hmm.
you didn't get any of the natural dissonance that occurs when you play them all at the same time coming from the
Yep.
same instrument.
Yep.
Yep.
Yep. Yep. Yeah, that's a trick some people use. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. Yep. I wish I could remember the name of the band. I can't remember. But that wasn't the that was the first time that I had heard that. I'm like, what are you
Mm-hmm.
talking about? What do you mean? You played a chord one note at a time. You just recorded one note? Yeah. And they just stacked all those multi tracks on top of each other. You
Yeah.
know?
Again, if you use distortion, that's one way. I mean, some people like having the distortion crunch through the chord, but if you don't want that, you just record one note, then the other note, then the other note
Well,
separate.
I think the idea of it was is that they were using overdrive, but the sound of like the root against the third sounds differently when it's two separate instruments playing the note as opposed to those two notes emanating from the same instrument with overdrive. You could have distortion and distortion on two separate notes, but when you put them together, it doesn't sound the same.
Mm-hmm.
You
Could
could,
it be? Could it be this? Hysteria by Def Leppard?
yes, yes, that probably is it. Absolutely, that's it.
Thank you,
That's it.
Warren.
I knew it was. I knew it was one of those bands. When Hysteria come out, late '80s, early '90s. I know it was of that time period. I know it was of that era. I read an
Mm-hmm.
article. Yes, absolutely. Yeah,
Yeah.
very good. Thanks, Warren.
That's, thank you, Warren. See, yeah, that's the idea, indeed. So the thing is, there's more than one approach. There's not like one right approach. It's more than one approach. It's that's where the creativity comes in.
Mm.
You see, and so where do you get started here? You start thinking like, what options do I have? Okay, I can play on a guitar. I can double track the guitar. I can play single notes rather than the full chord. I can play high notes. I can play low notes. I can play high and low notes on the same instrument or on different instruments. Okay, so you have all this kind of thing. Also, there's a big difference between playing, I don't know, and playing, and these are the same notes, a D and an F, minor third, but the way you play them makes a big difference in how the music sounds. So,
Hmm.
I mean, it's really not hard to do this. Okay, but it does sound good, and it adds this kind of different thing on
I think the
the rhythm.
simplicity of it is what people shy away from saying, but that's just too simple. I can't do that. That's just way too simple. I really truly think that the simplicity of it, but those that allow themselves to say, yeah, that's okay. It sounds good. You don't have always have to make it harder and harder and harder for yourself. You don't have to grow an extra finger.
No, if it's too complex to play, I mean, it's a rhythm part. It's not a lead part. If it's too complex to play, you may be doing something wrong.
Mm,
Okay, you probably again, you never know because it's music and everything can make made work. But if it's too complex to play, I will try. Maybe it's also too complex to hear. Okay, maybe simplify it. Maybe find a different way of playing it. Maybe split it in two instruments rather than one. Okay. Um, I mean, there is space for complex stuff. I'm not saying no. People should learn to play complex stuff. I'm not saying no. But the single part that should be understandable. Okay, that's the thing. People should be able to follow it when they
yes.
listen to music.
I totally agree with you. When I chord, when I finger, I should say, I very rarely play bar chords.
Mm,
Very
mhm,
rarely play bar chords, meaning including the bass note in there. I very, very rarely do that. Instead of having my fingers like this, I actually typically play only a 5 string version of it. Very rarely do I do, unless I'm playing very hard rock or metal. And I want that going on there, but very rarely. I just take the F chord and I move it around because in an ensemble that I'm playing with, there's a bass player, and I'm so much in the habit of this that my students call me out on it all the time, saying, "What version of the G chord are you playing there? What is that?" And I'm like, "Oh, I'm just leaving out the lowest note." They're like,
Yeah.
"Why?" I'm like, "Well, if I'm playing with other people, I don't need it. I don't need to play it because somebody else is covering that. So I just leave it." Really? Yeah. It just makes it. I think it sounds better. I think I
Yeah.
can hear myself better when I do that. You know?
Yes. Paradoxically speaking, the more advanced are the people you are playing with, the better is the bass player, the better is the drummer, the better is the piano player, the simpler is your life.
Yes.
because because you first of all, one thing you said, you never use bar chord. I never use them either. Okay. And I'm very, every time I get people, I have students like, I can't play bar chords, and I'm like, don't. Okay. It's, I mean, sure, there may be the case for playing these occasionally, but they are, yeah, bar chord are one of those techniques that are pretty hard to learn for a beginner because the bar, the
Mm.
beginning, it's hard. They're used mostly by beginners, and then the more advanced you are, the more they disappear.
Yep.
If I never learned bar chords, it will not be much of a difference for me, okay, in any situation that I have been paid to play. I practically never played bar chords.
Yeah.
It just doesn't happen. Okay, it's very very rare, very very rare.
3, 4 strings maximum.
Yeah, I mean, it can be they ask you to play an arpeggio like that. When this happens, you notice that most of the song you are there. So typically, just put a capo there, and you're done.
Thank
it's
you.
yeah. I mean, it's
I love capos.
I mean, think of a Hotel California, no? Okay, then you put a capo at the seventh. You don't bar everything, okay? If you really really want to play that. It's very rare that you have to play bar chords in a band situation, in a professional situation. Again, it can happen, sure. Better to have them than not have them, sure. But I think lots of people get obsessed by that because they seem like the logical progression after the first easy chords.
Yeah, and I see a lot of people, they will finger a full bar chord, but they're not playing all 6 strings. That's more of a habit their hands go to than playing like what I do. I don't bring my finger across all the strings.
Mhm.
But I think
Yeah,
it's more of a habit because I'm not hearing 6 strings. It's just that's the way they finger it, but they're all of a sudden this
mhm,
only plays a certain number of strings.
exactly.
I mean, I think you can get away with only learning your chords on strings 1, 2, and 3, and then no power chords on 4, 5, and 6. And I think you got it
Yeah,
pretty well covered.
exactly, exactly. By the way, that's pretty much what I teach to most of my students too. I teach them the chords on 1, 2, and 3, and triads on 1, 2, and 3, and on 2, 3, and 4.
Yep.
The 2, 3, and 4 simply because they sound so good.
Oh, those are the best. Those are the best. Absolutely.
Okay,
And
but
then you could do, and then you could have fun all day, you know. You could play almost every Rolling Stone song written and half of everything else written in the 1970s as far as rock goes. So real. You know, two,
Yep.
three, and four is fun.
And that's the thing. Those are way easier than play bar chords.
Yeah, they are. Yeah, yeah, absolutely, absolutely. But yes, that's why I said 4 strings maximum. You can cover a lot of ground. So we don't have a lot of time, but I had one quick question for you. Inversions.
Uh-huh.
Another thing that seems like a massive point of confusion with students of mine. So, and it's not so much so that we're playing the same notes, but the lowest note is not the root note. That's a pretty easy concept. Where they get hung up, and I know what your answer is going to be, but I'm going to ask you anyways. But what they get hung up on is, why is that called root and that one first and that one second? Shouldn't it be called first, second, and third?
Eh,
That seems to make more sense to me. And I go, I agree with you. I didn't make this up.
okay. The problem with that is this: is that music theory was not invented by one person. Okay, music theory was invented by lots of people through the centuries and in different places. And there was not the internet. Those people were not even communicating with each other much. I mean, they were occasionally one of them was publishing a book. The book was printed somewhere else. Somebody was reading it and then was publishing another book. Conversations are slow if you have to publish books to have a conversation. So what happens is that in the centuries, we use different ways of conceptualizing the chords and other things. So sometimes we're thinking about the bass, sometimes we're thinking about the roots, sometimes we're thinking about intervals, sometimes we're thinking about notes of the scale. And we use numbers for all this stuff. So 3 could be the third of the chord, or the third above the bass, or the third note of the scale, which they may be the same note, may not be the same note. Okay, so since these, and by the way, all those people were also not agreeing with each other because they were very much like, no, this is the right way and this is the wrong way, and they were using different systems. Okay, the idea that we have one music theory is kind of a fiction. Okay, even today, even with the internet, people still tell you there is one music theory, but in reality, if you go and talk with those people and see how they think, they think in radically different ways. They do different things and they don't agree. And they all think all the other people are completely wrong and they don't understand music theory when they simply have a different system. Okay. So the notes are called 1, 3, and 5 because if you're thinking that way, you're thinking of the scale. If you're thinking A minor, you're thinking of the A minor scale, where the first note is A, the second note is B, the third is C, which is in the chord, fourth is D, not in the chord, and fifth is E, so 1, 3, 5. Okay? So, it's strange to use numbers in the scale to indicate notes in the chord, but that's because sometimes you want to bring in other notes in the scale, and so that's one way of doing it. Okay? But you could also think of those as intervals. So the third is 1/3 above the root, and the fifth is 1/5 above the root. But when you start putting in inversion, everything goes astray because, I mean, you are putting the third at the base, so it's not the third anymore. Okay, it's the base. So at this point, there are two ways of thinking. The people who count everything from the root, which is what we do most of the time in modern music, where the root is defined and it doesn't change even if you change the order of the notes. Or you can count everything from the bass note. And that's what they were doing, for instance, in the Baroque era. They were not thinking of the root of the chord. The root did not exist. There was no root. It's like we have the bass note and we think of the intervals on top. Okay. Honestly, I know both systems. I've used both systems. I kind of like better the Baroque system at this point. It's easier once you get used to their mental positioning. Okay, it's easier to think that way. But if you know the modern system, I mean, use it. If you're used with that, use it. I wouldn't have you forget one and learn the other. Okay. By and large, they're equivalent at the end of the day. Okay. So the answer to your question is the naming of things don't always make sense. They don't make sense for two reasons. One is what I just said, is because the naming was established by different people in different times, in different places, and they didn't agree. So sometimes we are using the name for the notes from one guy and the naming of the chord from another guy and the naming of the interval from a third guy and the name, okay, and the naming of the sharps and flat from another guy. And those guys, if you put them in the same room, they could not stand each other. Okay, they will fight endlessly with the exact same points that you will bring up. Like, this doesn't make sense. That's one reason. The second reason is because music theory doesn't have to make sense because it's not mathematics, despite what most many people think. And I say this being an ex-mathematician, okay, or still mathematician technically, but music theory is supposed to describe what your ear is hearing. And your ear does a number of things that are not logical because that's what it does. Okay, just like your eye does a number of things that are not logical when you do all the kind of visual illusion, okay, visual, and you see stuff moving when they're not moving, or shapes where there are no shapes. Okay, the ear does the same. So the ear hears not that they are not there, or doesn't hear not that they are there, or interprets the same pitches in different ways depending on the context. So your ear does a number of things that are not logical from the physical point of view, and music theory has to describe that. So when people tell me that the system of sharps and flat doesn't make any sense, they are right, but that's how your ear is doing the hearing. That's why we do it. Not because it's logical. It's not logical at all. So it's a mix of those two things. So even if you want to stay there and separate the two things, it will take a long time.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Makes sense? So,
Well, the bigger picture was, I just wanted you, for any students that are mine, the answer is, the shortest answer is, it doesn't make sense. And I can't explain it to you in a way that would make sense because it never made sense.
you just need to get used to it.
Yeah.
It doesn't make sense, but you just need to get used to
That's
it.
just the way those are the words we use to describe it.
Yeah. And I mean, at the end, once you get used to it, it makes sense. It's a good description of what's going on.
It is. Yes.
It makes more sense to an advanced musician because they have experience, they have listened to lots of songs, they've played lots of songs, and so when you describe it this way, you start describing something that's in their experience.
Yeah, it's retroactive.
Yes, if you're a beginner and you hear this, you don't connect those concepts with a sound yet.
Yeah.
You just look at if they make sense mathematically, and it's like, it doesn't make any sense. And you're right, it doesn't. But that's because the reality doesn't make any sense.
Correct.
Okay, or better, the way your ear processes the sound doesn't make sense.
Almost
in the
like
way
the
you
Baroque.
think it should make sense.
The Baroque method seems more logical.
It is very logical, and it is also very close to how the ear is doing the processing. There are some disadvantages to that. Like, I mean, if there was a method that was clearly better, we would use that.
Right.
But there are some disadvantages to the Baroque method, meaning inversions are easier to play, but it's harder to reason with because you don't realize that you're playing, I mean, unless you know it, you don't realize you're playing the same chord in an inversion because it's not in a completely different way. Okay, and this becomes specifically evident when you start talking about diminished seventh chord. But in the Baroque notation are always like, when you see a lot of sharps and flat throw like randomly, you're like, that's probably a diminished seventh chord. Okay, so, but again, there are advantages and disadvantages. That's the idea. Okay, there's not a perfect system. There can't be, because some of this stuff is genuinely difficult. So if you make some stuff easy, other stuff becomes difficult. And if you make some stuff, then the difficult stuff easy, what was easy now becomes difficult, essentially. Because I mean, there is a minimum amount of difficulty that you can take out of the system. Okay, that's the thing. So, hope this wasn't too abstract. But that said, Mark,
Yes,
you got something for us.
I
So,
do have something for you.
so let me put it on screen.
Yeah, go
This-
ahead. A lot of students of mine and others wonder how notes are chosen that you hear a lot of in between chords. And so I wrote this beginner's guide to adding lead guitar elements to your rhythm playing. So what this does for you is it gives you very, very, very from the beginning instruction on if you were going to be playing a certain set of chords, what are the exact notes that you can play that will always sound good. It's complete with tab notation. It shows you the chords. It shows you exactly what notes to play in the order to play them. So if you've never done anything like this before and always wondered how, this will give you the most basic elementary introduction to this. And then literally not too much longer after you just get through this, you're going to be understanding how this works and you're going to be doing a lot more complex things all on your own. So it's the beginner's guide to adding lead guitar elements to your rhythm playing. It's an excellent place to get started for this kind of stuff.
Fantastic. You guys get the link of this in the description of the video, so go and get that. And I mean, it's free.
It's
Okay.
free.
Yeah. And,
I like free.
yeah. Who doesn't? So just to break tradition with that, in this moment, I'm going to show you something that is not free instead, okay? Because I just launched my new course. That's new course called Modulation Mastery. This is not free. But it's amazing, okay? In this new course, I am showing you how to create key changes, how to go from one key to another in several inventive, emotional, dramatic, relevant, meaningful ways, as opposed to what everybody else is doing, which is telling you, this is the shortest modulation from C major to E minor. I'm showing you also the shortest modulation, no problem. But why would you do that? The point of a modulation is not just to go from one key to another. The point of a modulation is to give your audience, your listener, the feeling of moving from one key to another. And so your listener does not want a short, by the book modulation. They want an emotional trip or emotional journey from one key to another. This course shows you how to do that. And it shows you how to do that in several different ways. That is the standard classical way, of course. It's there, you have it, no problem. But I'm also showing you very modern way of doing that, okay? Very chromatic way of doing that. And I'm showing you, crucially, also ways of changing key without using chords, because lots of people are like, no, my style of music is mostly single note riffs, okay? You play blues or rock or metal. So you never play full chords or other things or seventh chord, etc. Well, this course shows you also how to change key using single note riffs. Okay, so if you play blues, rock, metal, or any other style based on single note riffs, you can still change key and you can still make them sound awesome. By the way, some of the sound of those key changes with single note riffs, some of them you know it because you listen to music that has them. And you're wondering, what did they do here? You are, okay? Because it's not clear what they do there. It took me a lot of research to understand what was going on, okay? And so I'm explaining to you how exactly it works, okay? So have a look at that, okay? musictheoryforguitar.com/modulation-mastery. Have a look at that. By the way, if you go on that link, there is also a short video trailer so you can see me playing a few of those things, okay? And you can see how it works. And as you see, everything is transcribed on the screen on piano and score while I played. Anyway, have a look at that, okay? Just launched. I'm still here because I'm trying to find a way to take the image off the screen, sorry. Okay, there we go. Okay, now, yes, you go. Yeah. There we go. Okay. So, Mark, thank you for coming in today.
Thanks for having
Always
me.
nice to have conversations with you.
Always.
Okay. You see, guys, the thing about Mark is that he's a working musician. I know whatever he says, he's done this in practice and he's seen many people doing this in practice. Okay. So whenever Mark says something, I'm listening. And by the way, you should too. So go back at the beginning of this video, listen to what Mark is saying. That's good stuff in there.
Always
Thank you.
listen. It'll tell you what you're supposed to do if you're always listening on the guitar.
That's it. Thank you, Mark. Thank you, everybody who came here today. Okay. If you have any questions about whatever we were doing now, or the course, or Mark free stuff, write to me or to Mark. Not a problem. Okay. And until next time, enjoy.